Good afternoon. Again, sorry I'm not here today. I'm in a meeting and I'm unable to be here. Trust me, I'd much rather be in here trying to help us learn. But while I'm not, let's make sure we get something done today. So hopefully you've grabbed bell work and you're working on these two problems. Let's look over them and see what we can do. So this is review from Friday. We went pretty quick on Friday. Make sure we know what we're doing. So it says find the exact value at the cosecant of 390 minus 2 sine of negative 150. All right, so first one, cosecant of 390. Hopefully you recognize 390 is too big. So first thing we're going to do is subtract out a circle. We'll subtract 360 out. So we're really doing the problem cosecant of 30 degrees. So if we're doing cosecant of 30 degrees, I'm going on my unit circle to 30 degrees here. I'm doing cosecant, so cosecant is r over x. Oh, no it's not. It's r over y, sorry. R over y. So looking at my unit circle at 30 degrees, here's my r is 2. Here's my y is 1. So I'm doing 2 over 1. That's cosecant of 30 degrees, or just 2. Minus 2 times whatever sine at negative 150 is. Well, I can't get to negative 150. Here's positive 150 right here, going that direction. If we're doing negative 150, technically what we were doing is the exact opposite. So I'm going to flip this upside down. I'm really doing this. I'm really going the opposite way. Now I'm headed over this direction. It's going to end up being 210 degrees. Okay, just as many as I'd go this way, 5, 6, 7. I'd go the other way, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, or the other way is start with 360 and subtract 150 out of it. It is telling you to do the sine at 210. So I'm going to 210 degrees. I'm looking up sine, which is y over r. So it is negative 1 over 2, or negative 1 half. I'm multiplying here. Negative 2 times negative 1 half. I have two negative signs, so it becomes a positive sign. And then 2 times a half, half of 2 is 1. So my problem becomes 2 plus 1. The answer is 3. So again, just looking at my unit circle and plugging in what you need to know. All right, let's check out the second problem. Given that ordered pair, find the trig function. R is not 1. So like any problem like this, if we're finding a trig function, the first thing I want to do is figure out what x, y, and r are going to be. It's an ordered pair, so x and y are really easy. Negative square root of 17. 8 is my y. I'm trying to figure out r. I've got x and y. I'm trying to find r. Anytime we got 2 and missing the third one, we're going to do Pythagorean theorem. And we do the fancy Pythagorean theorem of x squared plus y squared equals r squared. Plug in what I got. Negative square root of 17 squared. Well, if I'm squaring a negative, if you square a negative, that's positive. And square root of 17 squared, the square and the square root are going to cancel, leaving me just 17. Plus 8 squared. 8 squared is 64. 17 plus 64 is 81. Equals r squared. So if 81 is r squared, I'm going to square root. Square root, r is 9. Once I've got my x, y, and r, this problem is really easy. I'm doing cosine. So cosine is x over r. So my x is negative square root of 17, and my r is 9. Negative square root of 17 over 9 is my final answer. All right? So there's bell work. Whoever's running my classroom, please hit pause on this video and pass out the note paper. All right, so hopefully you have your notes. Today we're doing a very simple thing. It looks a little bit complicated at times, but for the most part it's pretty easy. We're doing something I like to call the trig puzzle game. All right, so the first thing we have to understand is a quadrant. So imagine that this is a big x and y axis. If you were to start here in the middle and go right and up, you're in quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4. Make sure you have to know in this quadrant, x is blank and y is blank. We need to understand, we just did this on our quiz on Friday, but we need to understand how these things work. All right, in every quadrant, I need to know where is x positive, where is x negative, all of those things. In order to do anything we're doing today, make sure you understand what's what. If you go right and up, x is positive and y is positive. If I'm in quadrant 2, I'm going left and up. So x is negative and my y is positive. In quadrant 3, I'm going left and down. So if I go left, I'm negative. If I go down, my y is negative. And if I'm in quadrant 4, I'm going right and down. So if I'm going right, x is positive. I'm going down, my y is negative. That's key to today. If you don't understand where x is positive and where x is negative, you're going to really struggle. So hopefully that makes sense to you. We just did it in on our quiz. So here's what we're doing in these problems. They are going to give you 2 bits of information. And given those 2 bits of information, you're going to figure out which quadrant are they talking about. So they're going to discuss, it's kind of clues to get us to the final answer. So I always like to draw these quadrants on my paper, so I drew them for you on example A, but eventually you can write those in yourself. So sine is less than 0. So again, I'm going to write this out very literally. Sine is y over r. And if a number is less than 0, okay, if you have a number less than 0, it's either positive or it's negative. If you're less than 0, hopefully you know that means you are negative. So you are making a fraction where when you take a y value over the r value, your answer is going to be negative. We talked about this a little bit last week, but remember, r is a radius. If you were talking about the radius of a circle, our radius is never going to be negative. So when you talk about y over r being negative, that r does not matter at all. It's always positive. So for all these problems, when I see an r, I'm just disregarding it. So it tells me what it really is telling me. If sine is less than 0, that means my y has to be negative. So in which of my quadrants is y going to be negative? Well, that means I have to go down for my y value to be negative. So the 2 quadrants that this one could be discussing is quadrant 3 right here, where my y is negative, and quadrant 4, where my y is negative, because they're the down quadrants. My y is negative. So it's either, my answer is either going to be quadrant 3 or quadrant 4. This is going to tell me which one it's going to be. Cosine is less than 0. So when I'm thinking cosine, cosine is x over r, and less than 0 is negative. So again, just like the last one, when we see that r doesn't matter because r is always positive. So that's not going to affect us here. So I really just need to know, when is my x value going to be negative? Well, my x is negative if I go to the left. If you're moving left, then your x value is going to be negative. So that talks about quadrant 2 and quadrant 3. Those are the only 2 options. So now we can make our decision. In the first one, it could only be 3 or 4. In the second one, it can be only quadrant 2 or 3. Which quadrant is true for both of them? Quadrant 3 is the one that matches up. So name the quadrant. Which quadrant does this thing work for? The answer is quadrant 3. As you get better at this, you can go way faster than that. Some of you already, I'm sure, can go quicker, but that's the idea. Let's look at letter B. Sine is less than 0. That means y over r is negative. Okay? Secant is greater than 0. So that means r over x, that's what secant is. Secant is r over x, is greater than 0. If you're greater than 0, you're positive. Think about that for a second. See if you can figure out where you're going to be. The first one, y over r is negative. Again, don't care about r. So it's just telling me, where's my y negative? So if my y is negative, that means I am going down. I'm in quadrants 3 and quadrants 4. That's where My y is negative. Down in quadrants 3 and quadrants 4, my y is negative. The second part says r over x is positive. Still, I don't care about r. So all I really want to know is, when is x going to be positive? Well, x is positive when I go to the right. So when I go to the right would be quadrant 1 and quadrant 4. So which quadrant is true for both of them? My answer is quadrant 4. Hopefully you're starting to get a feel for it. Gets a little bit different here in a second, but not a whole lot different. Letter C. Oh no, I didn't draw you quadrants. So the first thing I'd suggest you do is draw some quadrants. First one says sine is less than 0. Go ahead and mark that one on your paper without me. Try to think about it for a second. Sine is less than 0. Done this one on everyone so far. Y over r is negative. Don't care about r. So my y is negative. So if my y is negative, that means I'm going down. Hopefully that's starting to get easy. The second one is the hardest thing about anything we're doing today. It says cotangent is less than 0. Cotangent is less than 0. If we're talking about cotangent, cotangent is x over y, and if it's less than 0, it's negative. Well, this isn't like the other one. So for every other problem we've done so far, we are able to mark out the r and say, hey, my answer is y is negative. Done. Well, this one, x can be positive or negative, and y could be positive or negative, so I can't cross either one of them out. I think the easiest way to do this one is to think about what it's not going to be. What if your x was a positive number and your y was a positive number? If both of them were positive, like that would happen here in quadrant 1. Okay? In quadrant 1, your x is positive and y is positive. If they were both positive, would that give you a negative answer? No. If they're both positive, that's not negative. So we are not talking about quadrant 1. Well, where else would it not be negative? So if I'm dealing with a fraction, what if x was negative and y was negative? If they were both negative. Well, if both of your things are negative, if you have two negatives, that also gives you a positive answer. So that's not going to work. Quadrant 3, your x is negative because you're going left, and your y is negative because you're going down. So in quadrant 3, cotangent would be positive. So that one is not your answer. All right, so I'm left with these two quadrants. In quadrant 2, my x is negative and my y is positive. If you had one negative sign, yep, x over y is negative. Or in quadrant 4. In quadrant 4, I'm going right and down. So my x would be positive, but my y would be negative. If you have one negative, that would get you a negative answer. So where is cotangent negative in quadrants 2 and 4? Where are they the same? They are the same in quadrant 4. Okay, a little bit trickier, not crazy. Let's have you try this next one on your own. So it looks slightly different. It's not. Here it says cosine is negative 3/5. They tell you a number here. Who cares that they told you a number? All I care about here is x over r is negative. It's a negative number. That's all I care about. And here it says tangent is 4/5. So y over x is positive. That's what it's telling me. So whoever's running the classroom, please hit the pause button on this video and see if students can figure this out on their own. So hopefully you got a chance to try it. Let's see. If x over r is negative, because cosine was negative, don't care about r. X is negative when you go to the left. So that it tells me it's either quadrant 2 or quadrant 3. Y over x is positive, so I can't cross out either of them. In order for that to be positive, one of two things has to be true. They either both need to be a positive sign. If x and y were both positive, I would have a positive answer. or they both could be negative. A negative over a negative would get me a positive sign. That's a negative fraction bar negative. It looks really weird. But that is where y over x is going to be positive. So either in quadrants 1 or quadrant 3. So where do they overlap? Where do they both have something true? Quadrant 3 is going to be my final answer. Let's do one last one. Let's try letter E. Let's try letter E. Take a second, see if you can figure it out. Please hit pause so students can try it. Cosecant is greater than 0. Means r over y is positive. So y is positive in quadrants 2 and quadrants 1, where I had to go up. Y over x is positive. I can't cross anything out, so I need their signs to be the same in order to be positive. They are both positive in quadrants 1 and both negative in quadrant 3. So where do they overlap? Quadrant 1. Hopefully you're starting to get a feel for it. If you do the last one, I'll just give you the answer. The answer for the last one will be quadrant 4. See if you can back that up by trying it on your own. You don't have to, though. If you flip your note paper over, there's going to be some practice. So on the back side here, there are 10 problems. Okay, these are all a review. We only have one more day of learning in this chapter, and then we will take our test next Tuesday. So we're getting pretty close. So for the rest of the period today, you're going to practice this stuff on your own. I'm going to check it tomorrow. It'll be a double homework assignment. So there are 10 problems there. You need to figure them out. The last 2, you need your calculator, so you might want to do those first. But this is the things you have to know in order to do well on this test coming up. So go ahead, see what you can do, spend the rest of the time. It's a double homework assignment. I'm going to count it twice as much as every other assignment we've done so far. You can work with your neighbors, you can work by yourself. I don't care, but get it done for tomorrow, and I'll check it then. If you have questions, I'm here in the morning. Feel free to come in and talk to me then. If not, I'll see you tomorrow.